Hello, and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we'll be reviewing Judas and the Black Messiah. So Judas and the Black Messiah stars Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield. It's directed by Shaka. It's about an informant who kind of infiltrates the Black Panther movement in the 1960s and about some of the specific people that had to do with this incident. So Matthew, what did you think of Judas and the Black Messiah?
So I would say there's things about this movie that I really enjoyed, and there's things about this movie that I didn't quite enjoy. But for the positives, I think this film is wonderfully directed and performed. The actors are fantastic in this movie. I think the main problem was I found myself feeling very disconnected from their characters. I mean, this is based on true events, so I feel like these people were kind of being reduced to characters in a film rather than, like, their humanity was kind of being sidestepped for the historical portrayal of their character in a film. I felt this most egregiously with the side characters, kind of like everybody that was supporting the two main characters. The character of Deborah Johnson, she comes from this very academic, point of view. She's a poet. And I felt like there was something building there in terms of something deeper. And then I felt like her character was just kind of sidetracked for the rest of the movie. They were kind of only utilized when a big event required them to be utilized. And until then, they were just kind of floating around in the background. They might have a line or two, but you didn't really get a sense of who they were or their importance. And it wasn't until something happened to them, such as a death or a pregnancy, that you would be like inundated with this character all of a sudden, and that they held some kind of great importance, which, historically they do, but I didn't feel that in the film. I wanted to feel that in the film, and I didn't feel it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the biggest problem here is within the writing, for sure, but also within the messaging of the film. I think the first half of the movie does a really good job of engaging with a more kind of nuanced view of race relations in the 60s, particularly around more volatile groups, and that includes the police force in the 1960s. But as the film progresses, it makes things, I think, too clear, and it kind of belies the first half of the movie, or it negates the first half of the film. It makes people into clear cowards or clear martyrs in a way that the first half of the film doesn't. And I may have been okay with either scenario, like a very nuanced scenario or a very straightforward scenario, if it had been more consistent. I want to clarify, too, that when I talk about nuance in films like this, I don't necessarily need nuance in complexity. There are, I think, very effective films and very effective books that ardently don't want you to feel nuanced. They want you to feel outraged. There's not a lot of nuance to feeling outraged, but you can't have them both at the same time. You can't be engaging with these in a cerebral, complex way for half the film and then suddenly turn revolutionary for the second half of the film without a proper transition, which I think is the main issue here. I kind of say this thing a lot, that revolutionary art doesn't really have time for nuance, and I do agree with that. I just don't think that this film made itself into revolutionary art very well.
I definitely want to compare this movie to Mangrove because it's dealing with the same racial politics, roughly the same time period. It's a different country, of course, but a lot of these things are very similar in terms of...
And there's a little, not to the same degree, but a little exploration of Black Panther movement in Mangrove.
Yes, but I think the main thing is that there's a conversation about these subjects. And how do you treat your characters that are based on real life people?
Yeah, you have a responsibility.
Yeah, you have a very big responsibility here, and I feel like just Mangrove just did such a much better job of taking these people and remembering that they're people first. They're not characters on a page that need to be written, and they're not just what their place in history is. Yeah. They're more than that. Mangrove did such a good job of just showing you the humanity in these people and where they're in, the events that happen in the life and how they influence them. I think that came first in that movie. And I came away from that movie feeling something so deep for these people. But I feel like Steve McQueen had a very specific intention when he made his movie.
Which, by the way, he did 5 times last year. Five times he made a really great film that does the thing that you're talking about. But anyway, this movie actually makes me appreciate the work of Spike Lee a little bit more because he's explored this subject matter just extraordinarily through, over, 2 decades at this point. He's also sometimes in like the more right-wing media, he's kind of painted as this crazy madman, and he's not. His films have humanity for racists. Like his films are really very generous. And Do the Right Thing. I mean, Do the Right Thing was made in 1989, and look at how much further advanced that film is in its politics than this film.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were definitely trying to connect some of these aspects to how we are still stuck in present day, and I noticed them and I acknowledged them, but I don't feel like it had much intention behind it.
I do want to pivot and get a little more positive, even though this conversation is really good, and just give a huge compliment to the 2 main actors here who are really so good in this movie. I think Lakeith Stanfield in particular is just extraordinary, and he's extraordinary in everything that he's in. He's in Atlanta, and he's great in that show, playing a very, very different character. But it's great to see him just break out in such, high-level dramatic material here.
His role in particular required so much subtlety on his part, and there would be like moments where the camera would just like slowly kind of like look at him, and there would have to be something conveyed there, and he really did pull that off. I mean, what he was trying to convey in a look came across and actually worked very well, so props to him on that. One thing I do really like about this film is I'm loving how Black artists are being able to tell these stories about a lot of these influential people in history that we don't know.
I'm really glad that, we had a lot of extraordinary films this year made by women, made by people of color, and I'm so glad that it's changing that way. And, we hadn't heard of these people before this movie. We learned something about history from this film. And even though that we're saying the film didn't do this as well as we would like, it did cause us to read a little bit more about what actually happened and have a more informed view of racial history, which I think is important. I think that this movie, I'm almost harder on it because of what it could have been. It feels like there's a lot of good stuff here that's just not followed through, and that's almost more disappointing than something that's trying to be mediocre.
I think that's an interesting comment to make in terms of film criticism itself. Is like sometimes when you're watching a film and you're heavily criticizing it, it might seem like a bad thing, but it's not, because I see the promise here. And I do see a lot of good things about it. And I think it's just, that's what's happening here, is that there's these things that are kind of throwing me off too much. And you're like, damn, this could have been such a good movie if it got these few things right. So much hard work goes into movies and film, and there's so many people that are involved. You don't want to just take a movie and just say bad, 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 bad.
And this isn't bad.
No, it's definitely not bad. It's just, you notice, I mean, that's why we're critical, is because we're film critics of YouTube land.
Yeah.
With 60 views a video.
And basically what we're saying is watch Do the Right Thing.
Watch Do the Right Thing. Watch Mangrove. All right, so
let's go to grades.
Yeah, let's go to grades. So I think I'm going to give this movie a B-. I found a lot of promise in this movie. I just felt like it wasn't really fleshed out enough. Otherwise, the actors themselves did a phenomenal job for a director's kind of like making his way into the world. Like, he's definitely doing something worthy here. It's just a matter of, I think, fine-tuning some of his craft.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm at a C+. So to me, that's kind of like right on the border of recommending and not recommending. I'd say probably watch it. I think it's worth a watch, especially for the first hour and for the performances, for sure. But I echo a lot of the reservations you had about it, for sure.
All right, and that's it for our review of Judas and the Black Messiah. Please feel free to give this video a like if you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.